Okay, we are live. And I was just looking at LinkedIn. We already have like 40 people joining us. Super, super exciting. I know we're right at 5 Central for me here in Chicago, 6 Eastern. So as we give folks just another second to join, please drop a comment with where you're joining us from, or even what your favorite part of the book was, or your favorite like Chris Voss technique in general is. And I'm going to go through a smidge of housekeeping while you drop those comments, while we welcome folks. And first is just saying hello and Happy New Year and welcome to Business Book Club. Hugely appreciative of you taking time out of your day to join this discussion. Really excited to kick off our 2023 book club season with one of my favorites. I would consider it a new classic, Never Split the Difference by the legend Chris Voss. So again, drop a comment with your favorite part of the book or your favorite Chris Voss technique. You may have seen that Business Book Club is now on Patreon. I was saying to Travis and Tom before we went live that I'm creating my own micro community. I'm doing the thing that I always talk about on LinkedIn. So I'm going to continue to host Business Book Club for free on LinkedIn in February. So we have 2 sessions in February that you can join. Here are the details. What's in the Cards by Sherilyn Castleman, and then Sell Without Selling Out by Andy Paul. Andy Paul, who's the person that introduced Travis and I in the first place. And then we are going to pivot off of LinkedIn into our private Slack and Zoom community in March for the motivation myth, how high achievers really set themselves up to win. So some exciting things, or at least I think they're like very exciting things happening within the Business Book Club community. I'll drop a couple of links for you guys if you want to check out. Let's see here, copy. If you want to check out business, or maybe I won't drop links. Oh, there we go. Business Book Club. And certainly, you know, if you're into that, if you want to have some accountability, want to have a group of people that actually talks through how they're using the book, what they're doing with it, this is for you. So I dropped a link to the Patreon and dropped a link to the March book, which I'm pretty excited about. And in general, I think what you'll see with the 2023 lineup is that we're actually taking a bit of a pivot away from sales specific books and to some books that more generally talk about business acumen. So I just also dropped a link to the Google Doc that says what's already on the roster. And most notably, this matters to me, I think it matters to a lot of you, that the guest lineup as well as the author lineup amplifies at least 50% of the audience who are women or people of color. So really using this as an opportunity to amplify diverse voices, diverse authors, which I'm pretty jazzed about. Okay, that's enough admin. Hello again to everybody. Let's jump in. Book Club 2023, and I'm joined by 2 of my absolute favorite people. Gents, welcome. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself. Travis, you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, sure. First of all, shout out to you, Leslie, and thank you so much for having Tom and I on. Super excited to be here and so excited that you're diving in and starting head first in week 1 of the new year. So super excited for you. But hey, everyone, I'm Travis. I am, how do I put this? Curious, lifelong learner, to keep it simple. And I'm just on a mission to share as much of my learnings and experiences as possible with whoever wants to listen and could, get something valuable out of it. I don't know much, but I do know that learning and growing is something that I'm inherently just addicted to. And I love finding people like Tom and Leslie and everyone else here tonight who want to do that consistently. And yeah, it's just me in a quick nutshell. So excited to be here, y'all.
Ooh, I love that. And when I was putting together the runner show for this episode live, I realized that you're my first guest ever to be a repeat. I know.
Let's go.
Tom, this is your first time. It's certainly not your last. Tell the folks about yourself.
I mean, damn, Travis nailed it, right? Like that's a complete vibe that I'm walking into it as well, right? I'm going on year 16 sales vet, founder of my own company. I kind of took the solo journey the last 120 days, and I'm right there with Travis. I love to learn. I love to break different levels, kind of push yourself as far as you possibly could go, and make better iterations, right? Better 1% every day, and then just helping everybody else behind me. Right. I'm happy to lead that charge and then just drop golden nuggets along the entire way to empower others to do that same journey or that same growth, that want to do it. So diving into a book, talking about our learning, showing people how they can take these skills and not just read a book, but apply it to their life is a good thing to do. So I will be back if you'll have me.
Yes. Yeah. I can already say before we even jump in that I absolutely know I will have you back. And I love what you said about like dropping those nuggets. Being a practitioner is a word that you used right before we went live. And I want to, kind of dig into that a bit. But I'm seeing all of these names pop up in the chat. And like, these are some of my absolute favorite humans to learn from and network with on LinkedIn. So just, a huge thank you to each of you for joining, but really excited to see this group of like insatiable learners, of those folks that are curious, that like to give more than they receive, coming together for this discussion. Okay. So here's my first question, and Tom, I'm going to go straight to you because you sort of gave it away pre-show. Is this your first time reading Never Split the Difference, or are you crazy like me and you are reading it for the second time and also did the Art of Negotiation Masterclass?
I'm going to expose myself because I didn't know I was until you and Travis's reactions in the back room, but like, I'm not a book reader, right? I don't read books. I'm okay with that. I try. I've read a few. There are some classics that I have, but this was my first time actually diving into the Chris Voss book. I've heard of it, right? I'm a sales leader. We've all seen it and familiar with the practices. But for me, it was kind of interesting because I did apply a lot of these methodologies to my sales career without knowing, and kind of discover that through this book, and pick that up from other nuggets from people I've worked with. So I like what you're doing here with this book club. I'm going to be a part of it. I'm signing up, y'all. Come follow me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have Leslie push me into reading more books, because I think that's a great goal to have this year.
I love it. And like something that I thought was really interesting is, even though you had not read the book, how many of the techniques you then, now read in the book, you'd already been using.
Yeah.
You've already been a practitioner of so many of these techniques throughout your career. And I think like very much the first time I read it, some of the things, and I'll touch on this later, but like an accusation audit, for instance, that was something that I was already doing just like very intuitively. Yeah. And then they're like, so this is the second time I've read it. I've done the masterclass, and even rereading it this time, I was like, oh, I forgot that that's where I learned that, or that's where I read that. So I love it. Trav, what about you?
I'm gonna say I'm a weird one, because like when I was thinking about this before, I was like, I don't even know how many times, and I was like, is this 3? And I was like, does the masterclass count? Does the YouTube videos count? Do the interviews count?
Okay.
Bro, it's Leslie knows with me, it's like
this is a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle for you.
Yeah, because like this is the peep anyway. It's just, I'd probably say 3rd or 4th time revisiting, like to go deeper. But for me, it's more of like when I go deep on a person like Chris Voss, it's like what other instances, like I'll go pull up the interview from 2006 where he talked about being here when he said it the first time. So it wasn't like after, he went through it 75 times. So for me, it was like 3 or 4, and I love like the ancillary things like the master class, other interviews. And by the way, Tom, you don't have to read. It's okay. So anybody makes you...
You can listen. Also, like raise your hand in the comments if you're showing up and just using us as your Sparks notes. Like, that's cool too. You can just show up to the discussion if you don't have time to read, because let's be honest, life is busy, and it might be too big of a lift to do.
I miss my commute to work. You know, I used to have an hour to and from work, and that's what I would do is I'd put on a podcast and get like a breakdown of a book, or I would learn the concepts from other people's viewpoints. Or I would try to listen to the book and it would be picked up way easier. I know Wade put that in the comments a few minutes ago. And so I'm down to do that and do, you know, more listening or just doing a Spark Notes like this. Hey, I'm just going to tune in. I'll read all those books indirectly.
You know, I love that. And that's why I loved the master class so much, and going on Chris Voss's YouTube, on the Black Swan YouTube channel, because they do a lot of role plays. And I'm telling you, like, it is a game changer to hear him role play the concepts, because you sort of think of a response that you would use within his framework or concept, and you're like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing so good. And then you hear the one he comes up with, and you're like, I have so much left to learn. I see we have a shout out. Somebody in here said Josh Braun is also a Chris Voss based teacher. He is.
Yes.
Like, talking to him last night, and he 3 weeks ago went to a Chris Voss workshop, like in person. So, you know, I was rubbing shoulders with the guy. Very cool. Okay. I'm going to go really hard with this question. I know we're only like 10 minutes in. I'm going to go so hard.
Going for the jugular.
Yeah. Shout it out. What is your number one favorite Chris Voss technique?
Rule of three.
That was a full commit. I love it. Tell the people more about it and why it's your favorite, Travis.
Well, for me, I think the rule of three is a very interesting one, mainly because of like how it's used and how you can learn how to use it. And so for those that aren't familiar, like the rule of three is getting the person to commit to something in the same conversation 3 times.
3 times.
And so when I'm thinking about this, I'm like, okay, if you accept it the first time and then don't accept the second time, we might be in trouble, right? Like, you might say, yeah, we're good. We're going to get started on the 13th. That's 3 days from now. And I'm like, okay, like, are you sure you're ready to get started? Actually, yeah. Let me go ahead and bring in my other team member, right? And then it's like, all right, well, when you bring, and then you move forward, and then you got to get 3 consequential yeses in a row again. So then you got to re-up your yes stack. So for me, it's the rule of 3, because it always gives you a chance. And then when they start to kind of, once you close with a calibrated question and finish that gap, and you're like, if I can use Chris's calibrated questions with the rule of 3 and I can close the gap, and I always make sure that I don't leave the conversation with this, I might learn something in every one of my sales conversations. And so for me, the rule of 3 was the one that was like, real quick.
I like that. I think that's such a good call out. And like, you see it in so many of the other sort of little things we do too. Like, you know, now double opt-in for marketing is the way to go. Like, you really need to get that, not just yes, but like that yes. You see how many more folks are adopting like mutual action plans, where you are getting those yeses at every step, those continued yeses. That's wonderful. Okay. Rule of 3. And I also love that people are dropping their personal favorites in the chat. Keep that coming. Keep this chat active. Love to see it. Tom, what would you say?
Colin Mitchell mentioned it earlier, and I'm on the same page of mirroring. Be a mirror, right? I think what I do so well when I'm, you know, making cold calls, or I'm in discovery or going through the sales process, is I do a really good job on trying to match their tone, match the way they're entering the phone call as much as possible. You know, speak with that late DJ voice, or come in with that positive assertiveness when I need to. Kind of play with the flows, right? Pick up my highs when I need to, pick up my lows when I need to, and then also just mirroring back what they say, right? I love, people have seen me cold call and seen me close out calls and do stuff. I'm a very big repeater. I am like, hey, Leslie, just to confirm before we end the call, we went over this. This is what I'm going to be doing next, and I look forward to talking to you here, right? And I try to mirror what they say, use their own words against them. So that's probably my favorite technique, you know, that I've used over my career, and then discovered I had a label. And I was like, oh, there's a Chris Voss method. Yes, that's the one that I like in his book.
like mirroring is absolutely my favorite as well. Like a really specific use of mirroring, which is pulling 1 to 3 words out of the sentence that your prospect, whoever just finished with, and then repeating them as a question. And I was just actually recording a pod right before this with Maggie over at Mailshake. And she was asking for like a technique or advice that folks could use if they are maybe hearing microaggressions or like, sexism, racism, whatever at work. And I said, even in that situation, mirroring is my favorite. Like they say something that's stupid. And instead of trying to like fight back or like have a counterpoint, just being like sexist remark, whatever it is, and let them self-explain. So I love it in that. I have to show you how completely unhinged I am with how much I use mirroring. I didn't even realize it. Like to your point, Tom, you don't like realize you're doing it, and then you like reread the book, you look at it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God. So this is a text message thread with one of my friends where she said, I'm going to be busy with schoolwork. And I said, schoolwork? And then she said, I'm going to be in Detroit this weekend. And I said, Detroit? So I know this is not a prospecting interaction, but like talk about using these techniques to be able to encourage somebody else to like speak and share. I'm bringing them right into my text messages.
Well, and it's a hard thing to do, right? Like that took me a good time to put into practice, right? We're talking about reading this book and learning these concepts, but when you have the restraint or the control to do what you did in those text messages to just confirm or kind of bring this curiosity to Detroit, knowing that she's going to spill the next 5 minutes of like, yeah, I'm going to Detroit. I'm going to go to the restaurant. I'm going to do these things. And now you have all this ammo and you did nothing but just be like, Detroit? Like, and then that restraint versus like you do, what I used to do is just jump right in. Oh, I love Detroit. Detroit's so great. And like, I had to lead the convo or fill it. They are now being the filler of that convo, and you're building trust and ammo throughout the call.
Okay, I'm obsessed with this. Colin, hi, Colin. What if you mirror your prospect and your prospect mirrors you back? That would be truly Detroit. There's actually a really like funny TikTok skit. Have you seen it? Is that what you were just gonna say?
No, I was gonna say, but if that started happening, then I'm gonna be one to break I'm gonna start rapping or something crazy, just to pattern interrupt, like Detroit, what baby? Like come out Eminem, and then they're gonna be like
playing on the words.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's gonna be like, all right, let's come back, and then
go hard on that pattern interrupt. That's amazing. But real talk, if somebody was mirroring me back, I think that's a perfect opportunity to label. To be like, it seems like you're hesitant to answer my question, or it seems like you're hesitant to talk about this.
But I don't think. But see, then I would just keep playing back until I would play chicken until they got tired because I like it.
I like it, Colin. You can't just put us on the spot. You have to drop a comment and say what you were going to do as well. And I'm seeing some really great comments of what folks are using. Seeing a lot of labeling, a lot of mirroring, accusation, audit, rule of 3. Incredible. Okay. So in the first chapter of the book, Chris talks about how his expertise is an iterative experience, not an intellectual one. And like it very much speaks to me and relates to like what I hope to accomplish with reading these books and with the book clubs, is giving people a space to like test out tools and brainstorm and sense check. And he says the FBI, like what has gotten them to the point where they are exceptional at FBI negotiator, at hostage negotiation, is that they refine the tools that they use every single day. And I really do see a trend. And I saw it first on TikTok, actually, where they were really suggesting that the way to trick the algorithm was to create content that was savable, that people wanted to save. And the related psychology was that you, by just saving it, and we talked about this in Atomic Habits too, Travis, that by saving it, you've already tricked your brain into thinking that you've done most of the work so that you get that dopamine rush. And then you don't actually take the time to go back and like, you know, cook the thing or try the technique or learn the dance or, you know, whatever the heck it is. So I'm very excited to hear like how easy it was for each of you to pull out something specific that you have like used and tried, and like to see how many people in the comments pulled out specific selling techniques that they are, you know, actively using in their conversation. So just like a shout out to everybody for doing the work. So one of my favorite points that Chris makes a few times in the book is the importance of communicating with emotion over facts. And we've all heard that, right? Like data tells, stories sell. Like, you know, a story is 22 times more memorable than data, which I used a data point to communicate, but I think you get the point. Okay, but like here's the gist of it. This entire slide: humans are irrational, and so something that I didn't see in the chat and something that none of us mentioned were techniques like tactical empathy and active listening, like using those types of techniques taught or mentioned in the book to connect with your prospects, using emotion in like a really meaningful way. I'd love to hear your thoughts on like, you know, using tactical empathy or using active listening to connect with your prospects using emotion. Do either of you have any good stories where you've done that or good insight on that? I mean, like Travis, your job is creating community. So I know that you are out there building those meaningful connections.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the thing, I didn't think about it, but I was using active listening right now. One of the things that I do is like, I always write down words. So like the last things I wrote down were iterative experience, stories greater than data, and humans equal irrational. I only wrote 6 words on this paper. And what I always do with any conversation, I have a whole, and this might be good or bad, this is just how I learn, so take it what it is. I usually have a conversation, I put the title at the top of it, and then I'll use that during a conversation. So whenever I'm actively in a conversation with anyone, even if like prospect, no prospect, I'm usually within arm's reach of being able to write something down. And then once I start to understand, like to your earlier point about tactical empathy and like knowing when to use it, I treat everything the same and I don't even move forward, even if that's what we plan to go there to do. And so like, I remember one example of this was me going to a meeting with a founder. We were supposed to be talking about their marketing and sales strategy. We didn't end up doing that. We talked about the hard things they were going through because of what was happening in their actual life with their husband, and then with their partner, and then with what the actual business was doing, the direction of the company, and then like what was a normal, typical, you know, consult that any of us would do, right? Like, let's talk about your sales, your go-to-market, let's get your messaging down, your ICP. And then it turned into like, I just want to go relax and be with my husband. And then I was like, oh, bet, you should go do that. Let's not talk about any of this shit. And like that was an example of, you know, tactical empathy, I guess, mixed with active listening and how I use it.
Yeah, I like that because it's layered, Travis. Like the purpose of tactical empathy, of active listening, is to understand. And in that situation, like you had the self-awareness or the situational awareness to realize that the thing to understand wasn't the sales and marketing. The thing to understand was them and the, you know, the trials that they were going through in their personal life before you could understand that other layer. That's powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Tom, and to the audience as well, because I think this is a really interesting question. Like, at what point in your career did you realize that humans are irrational, or that like sharing a bunch of facts and data and strict ROI language just simply didn't sell as well as selling with emotion? And maybe it was like immediately.
So it wasn't immediately. Well, it sort of was. Like one of my first big jobs was I sold for-profit education. So I like help people go through enrolling in an online college. And so I would just call randomly people, cold call them that filled out like web forms and try to push them to go to college. And so I had to use tactical empathy. I had to use storytelling. I had to capture, like, Travis, why do you want to go to school? Like, why? Right? Or they were like, oh, I was just filling out the form to get to Career Builder back when that was cool. If anybody remembers Career Builder. And, you know, they gate the content. And so I had to get into storytelling and driving emotion of like this person trying to change their life because they just got out of prison and want to get back into school. Right. But it really changed for me when I stopped getting around ROI and this outcome driven conversation when I worked at a company called Infusionsoft with Christine Rogers and Aspireship. And I got to know Skip Miller and another book, Proactive Selling, that kind of talked about that not doing the ROI, talking to a human that they're really want you to lead. There's below and below, you know, above the line. So that was in like 2016. So way years later in my career, I was still doing stuff, but that's when it really hit. And I started getting more into, I'm going to storytell about scenarios. I'm going to connect with my customers, my prospects. I started really diving into my closed won customers to understand why they bought, what they were going through, what product did they change from, and then take all of that and tell that to my prospect, my next person, right? Hey, Leslie, let me tell you a story of another prospect I had, really similar to some of the things. And what you said, Travis, is taking down like 3 or 4 bullet words and then reusing those words throughout the storytelling, right? Like you mentioned that you really didn't like the onboarding team. Let me tell you how we helped this person, you know, on how quick our onboarding was. And you kind of find those pains that like pull at that string versus, hey, I'm going to give you a 20% increase in your business. I don't give a shit. That doesn't mean anything to me. What's it going to do for me in an emotional capacity?
Yeah.
So that was kind of my journey through all that.
The why does it matter piece is so important. And you touched on something else that isn't in this book, but I think is something that's so important that I see all elite sellers doing is communicating with social proof too. Of telling those stories of other people that have been there and like making them the hero and how they overcame and how they got to the what mattered for them. I think that is, that's spot on. I'm going to make another little value drop here. I just dropped it in the comments. I do an interactive coaching workshop series, and one of my like most popular by far is an active listening session. So I just dropped the framework I created for that in the comments. It's a Canva link. If people are like, where is it?
What is that?
Canva link, because I live and breathe Canva. I will not be taking questions. Canva is my heartblood. I love it so much. But hopefully folks can benefit from that, because
That's
like
fire.
you're to love Canva. It's so,
I love Canva. I'm addicted. Yeah. People
don't even know, but it's like it is also a scheduling tool. Yeah, I'm obsessed. This isn't an advertisement for Canva. They don't pay me. But one of the other things that like pivoting away from ROI language really taught me, or something that's sort of related to this. And it was also one of the things that when I reread the book, I was like, oh, I wonder if this book is where I got that from. But Chris Voss talks a lot about the concept of loss aversion. And let me just pop that up on the screen here for folks. But the gist of it, the theory argues that, you know, we're rational humans, and as irrational humans, we're drawn to sure things over probabilities, even when the probability is a better choice. And more importantly, as you can see on this slide, people will take greater risks to avoid losses than to achieve gains. And one of the things that I've been like, you know, preaching on for years is to move clients away from pain instead of toward gain. Like if you think about how you're communicating with them, how you're writing your email copy and making sure it's not ROI language. And that sort of revolution of moving, you know, people away from gain instead of just towards pain, like it like fundamentally changed how I sold. I was using a lot of like data backed ROI language, and like I mixed it up. And now reading this book again, I'm like, Was that where I got this idea? Who knows? Maybe I'll give Chris Voss the credit. But I'd love to hear your take on loss aversion, and if any examples of where you've been able to change that narrative of moving people away from pain instead of towards gain. And folks joining us too, any stories you have, please drop them in the comments. Anything pop into your head?
I mean, I have some like times when I was at Yelp. So I used to sell Yelp ads for businesses. And like a lot of times in those conversations, it was just about gaining more traffic. You get a free page on Yelp. If you were to buy into ads, we boost your numbers, right? And like that was going towards gain. And it didn't really work because Yelp was already free. They would already get business whether they paid more or not. And they knew their traffic. And so it wasn't a lot to drive away from when it came to, well, what would you do without your Yelp page? Or there was nothing to drive to pain in a sense. So in a lot of those conversations, you had to do a kind of a conversation around like the pain of staying where they are. So you dig into like, okay, what would a new oven do for you? What about, like the restaurants, right? Because they made like $2 a plate. So you'd be like, okay, what would these numbers do for you? And try to get them to see the loss, but the gain in the same way without looking at it like I'm just trying to give you more business. They're like, I don't care about more business. And it's like, okay, let's strip that away. Let's talk about the pain that would get you to get that gain, right? And the Chris Voss way, kind of dancing around it. But that's kind of like my only kind of conversation I would have to where it was driving towards that, to help them, get more gains without being like, oh, I don't care about your ROI. I want to know how this helps my pain. And it's like, dude, you can't afford your staff. You can't do this. But if I do this for you and you double down here, you're going to be able to see that in the next 60 days. What's that going to do for you? And they were like, okay, Tom, tell me that stuff. I want to hear that. That what wants me to do this, not that I get 500 more views a month. I don't care,
Yeah. That reminds me a lot of like the challenger language of making sure that your buyer understands that the cost of staying the same is greater than the cost of change. That's a good one. I really like that. Travis, anything that popped into your head?
It did, and then it made me feel like an a-hole after I realized how I was in this role. So long story short, I was working with an ed tech company back in the day, and basically we helped teachers understand and provide students with nonfiction articles that they could get at their just right reading level so they could read the same exact article their parents are reading about the Tesla space launch, right? But like a second grader could do it. Okay. And so like for these teachers, these principals, these district leaders, the loss aversion was, I'm gonna cut off your binder. You're not going to get to see the data about your students and what they were reading. So you can't give them individualized education plans. You can't hire another learning support specialist for the students who are struggling. You can't even go tell their parents that they need extra support because they don't understand science, because they can't read at the reading level, because they don't speak English. So now, like I said, I felt like an a-hole as I'm thinking backwards about all this. And like looking at like you took the data away to sell, and if they didn't upgrade to the pro version, then they didn't get the data, which then meant the teachers couldn't give all the things that I just said. Students couldn't learn, and then all of the things couldn't happen. So in this case, it's like I was always the dude like, I'm gonna extend that trial. It's free as shit for me. It doesn't matter. I don't lose money.
Yeah,
the kids are cool. Like. But at the end of the day, there's always like something, especially with a platform that's $1 billion company, right? So now I'm looking backwards and I got a soul now, right? And it's like, do you feel bad when you're in this position? And like, this is something that I think a lot more people, and maybe I'll start talking outwardly about it more, but like, I felt bad as the person that took off, little Emily's second grade nonfiction content. Not every salesperson would, but I personally did. And like having this situation where like, yeah, you took the data away and that pain was something that like could help to district raise money, hire people. It's like, it goes a lot deeper than selling software, at least for me. But yeah, I'm gonna come back up. But that's my story.
No, I really appreciate you telling that story because it's like an exceptional pivot to a topic that I really want to make sure we carve out a little bit of time to talk about. First, does anybody watch The Good Place?
Yeah.
Okay. Eleanor, who is Kristen Bell, she is a telemarketer, and there's this whole scene, tell me if you remember it, where she's selling fake medicine to old people, and she's explaining this to Chidi, like the other main character, and she's like, but Chidi, I was extremely good at it. I was the top salesperson 6 years in a row. And he's like, but you understand how that's worse, right? And your story just reminded me of that. Excellent show if people are looking for something to binge. Okay, but here's the pivot I wanted to make. Because obviously I love this book. I know the both of you appreciate this book and appreciate the techniques. Like a quick Google search says that, so do the majority of 80% plus of other folks who have read it. But some of the comments, particularly when I was like advertising the book for the book club, reminded me that not everyone appreciates the content, the knowledge that Chris Voss is dropping. And that's what I want to stay on for just a second. Most of the negative comments were that the advice he gives, the techniques he shares, are manipulative. And that by using these techniques, we are being those default slimy salespeople. We are manipulating people into doing something that they don't want to do. And even my dear friend, Jeff Bajorek, I don't know if he could ultimately join us today, but I asked for permission to share our conversation. But he even reached out sharing that he was surprised that I would do this book. Like I would amplify this book and this author, because he really feels like it gives him bro culture vibes and really frames conversations with our buyers, sales conversations, as very adversarial. I see Jeff. Hi, Jeff. But really, yeah, like gives those bro culture vibes and frames the communication that we're having with our prospects as adversarial. And anybody who has had one conversation with me, has followed me on LinkedIn for a single moment, knows that is like so hard, the opposite direction of what I want to communicate. So I thought it was worth calling out and having a conversation about it. So that like wasn't really a question, but thoughts?
Hey, I think it's about how you use it strategically, right? Like I get it. I read it. And it's coming from an FBI negotiator who dealt with some of the scrummy, right? And some of those people. And so he has a distrust in people or looks at it in a different lens. But I think the tactics still resonate in our space when used correctly, right? And when you heard all three of our examples, it was still coming from a place of empathy. It was still coming from where we stand as human beings when we are dealing with prospects. But like I ask leading questions. I'm trying to, I may not give you the answer I want you to, I want you to pick that, but I'm going to lead you there, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to do little things to where I'm going to get you to say the same thing 3 times just to make sure it's locked in and that we're confirmed. And are there tactics? I mean, if you want them to be used that way, if you're trying to ploy people out of things and put that square into a circle, but I think it's really just about using the tactics to truly show somebody you're trying to help them. And understand that they're a human being. And it's like, hey, I got to pull some levers here with you and speak your language. I got to mirror you. I got to go through some of these little journeys, because otherwise you tell me, are you going to open up to me? Probably not. What do you want me to do? These are my little ways to work with you, but I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it gives off a vibe per se. It's more perspective. You want to look at it that way, you're going to see it from that way. If you want to look at it from our lens, you're going to see it in a whole other way as well.
Yeah. I pulled up this comment from Jeremy because I feel like he absolutely hit the nail on the head with this example. The difference between manipulation and motivation is what the target does when they find out. Are they delighted because you helped them, or disgusted because you took advantage of them? Exceptional. Jeremy, really appreciate you sharing
Nailed
that
it.
comment. And wanted to pull up this comment from Matt
Yes.
as well. I think it's a good one, and something that in general annoys me. And Travis, I'd love to hear your take on this. I'd love to hear you speak to this. But something in general that annoys me about sales is how much of our language is like hunter, ninja, sniper. Like it's just this like insanely aggressive language, and I'm like, I'm not trying to murder my prospect. Like what? Like, I'm not going to hunt my prospects down and snipe them. Like my word. And I definitely like, once I read some of those comments and had that conversation with Jeff, was like, totally see how this book perpetuates that type of language. Whoopsie, time to call myself out in public and have a discussion about it. I don't know. Travis, what do you think?
So two things. One, let's also remember this man was sharing FBI hostage negotiation lessons in this book that says negotiating as if your life depended on it.
Depended on it.
Not, I'm going to sell you this SaaS software. So let's just, we're going to put it out there like that. So like, but to the point of adversary, which I completely agree with, like there was somebody about to die on the other end of every conversation that this man wrote about. So let's just put that there. And then also let's remember when he did write the book, and I've noticed some of this stuff, like a lot of like the historic quotes that we all look up to, they're all written with the context of men. Men's problems will be solved with their inability to sit in a room. People, right? And so like, again, this is just me reading my take. Like when you're going through a word like adversary, I don't think that he was even thinking of like his how it would be
over this.
Heck no.
Right.
If we just told his editing team to just, yo, bro, sis, can y'all just go change adversary to person, other, like whatever that is in context, they'd be like, oh wow, we didn't even know. Because like they're not looking at it in the context that all of us are. Most of us work at tech companies. Most of us sell software. So like adversary is a word where like my prospect, God damn it. We use the word prospect.
For real. What is that?
Like, let's be real. Client, lead. The word lead. I used to be allergic to the word lead when I was like an SDR. I'd be like, they're not leads. They're fucking people. So like that's my take. They're humans, right?
Randy's comment was just in here, like be human.
Facts.
Yeah,
Randy.
hit the nail on the head. There's this. Let me see if I have the slide. Yeah, there's a quote on page 53, and Chris is talking about tactical empathy and says empathy is not about being nice or agreeing with the other side. It's about understanding them. And I think like when I was rereading the book and I was thinking in light of these sort of calls to action from random comments on the internet and then Jeff Bajorek, I was thinking about how people can use these concepts for evil, and not just this book. Like there's a lot of sales books there that I think like the same claim could be made. And I very much landed with both of you that like the difference between using empathy in a forced way because you read a book and the book said, do it and you'll get your way, versus that genuine empathy that comes from a place of caring, that comes from a place of giving a shit. Like if you use the techniques to understand because you care, because you're actually curious, like amazing. My take is that if you are using the techniques in like a very contrived way, like you're gonna get found out. Like maybe it'll work on a few people, but like that is not going to make for a successful career to actively manipulate and like go into conversations with malicious intent in terms of how you're going to use these techniques.
And also
my favorite kind of takeaway. Oh, go ahead, Travis.
No, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, like, seek to understand and be understood, right? I say it all the time. It was one of those things where I discovered it from this book, right? But, like, that's where you want to come from is at the end of the day, it's not about agreeing. It's not about this tug of war. I always say, sales is the only game where winning, where you could actually lose. right? Because it's not. You're not trying to win anything. There isn't anything to do here. And so you just seek to understand and be understood. And from there, you know, you can build a great connection with somebody still using some of the techniques he gives.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Travis, what were you going to add? Check those notes, bud. What are those last 3 words you wrote?
Where it is? What are those nuggets, dude?
Empathy, understanding. It had something to do with empathy and understanding. But I'll get back to it. Let's keep going.
And just like extra snaps for you for just, I'm pretty much managing the chat for me. You're my hero.
I was about to say, and I was gonna tell people, if y'all see my neck breaking, it's because I'm going back and forth between the chat and the camera. So
yeah, no, you're amazing. You're my hero. I so deeply appreciate it. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you all for going down that rabbit hole with me. You know how much I deeply care about transforming sales into a respected, into an inclusive profession. So felt like it was something that had to be addressed. Okay, in our last 15 minutes here, let's talk more about techniques that we can use with the right intention to create more meaningful connections with our buyers. And it's time we get to the accusation audit. Oof, I know. Okay, so the accusation audit and labeling, I think it goes without saying, are both like pretty powerful, pretty amazing techniques. I'd love to hear from the audience. Like, drop a comment if you are currently using any of these techniques in your sales or personal conversations. I have been told they work extremely well in parenting conversations. For anybody that hasn't read the book, an accusation audit pretty much is like calling out the worst thing, like the worst thing that could happen or the worst thing that could be said by labeling the emotion or labeling the situation. And I was saying, I don't remember if this was before we went live or just at the very beginning of our call, but I was saying that accusation audits are one of the techniques that I had been using like very intuitively well before I ever read Never Split the Difference, both as a way to get in front of potential objections like in my sales career, and also as a way to connect with customer service reps. And I love the example that Chris gave in the book of using labeling to get a seat on an airplane during a like stressful travel event simply by like using tactical empathy and layering it with that labeling of naming the situation that was like a shitty situation. So I am curious to hear how the both of you are using labeling or accusation audits to get a deal negotiated or, you know, get a better flight, whatever it is. Got any stories to share?
I'm a dad and a husband. I do it every day. I do it every day. I do it with my wife all the time because after 12 years together, I kind of like, you start kind of getting a heads up on what's to come or like address it. And I'm very about calling the elephant out of the room real quick of like, if I know I want to go out this weekend or go do something, right? I already addressed it. I'm already getting in front of it. I'm like, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. I already know this is a concern of yours. Here's what I did to take care of that. Here's what I did. If all of that is squared up, how do you feel about me going and doing that, right? And then getting their buy-in, because it's like, or even with a client, like, hey, I know what you're thinking, Travis. You've probably been down this route. This is what happened before. You mentioned early in the call that you've been burned by prospects, you know, by companies before. I want to get ahead of that before we even get started, because I want to dive into that with you. Let's talk about that, right? And you just kind of do it for them because people need that. You're leading them. And then they feel trust, right? So it's a big thing that I've used my whole career. It was really cool to see him bring it up, because when you're able to do that, you let people like, I don't know. I think you ooze confidence with it too, because you feel confident to attack those big things before they will. What rep would bring this up even before I said anything? You must be bonkers. Small story. I saw a funny thing earlier today on TikTok from Tony Dungy about back in the day when they kicked off to David Hester in the Super Bowl and they weren't supposed to. They took 12 days prepping that they weren't going to kick to this guy. The night before, he heard the story of David and Goliath about being fearless and then taking on Goliath. That the next morning, after 12 days prepping, they decided to kick to David Hester on the opening drive and just attack the beast head on. Dude ran it back for a touchdown on opening drive. And it was like the whole sideline looked at me like, really, dude? And he was like, yo, I thought we could just attack it. I was like, no, we're not scared.
Devin Hester, bro, you wildin'. In the Super Bowl? What you doing? Sorry.
So it's kind of the same concept of like when you, I mean, in his way, it didn't work out, but like, don't be that rep that you're the consultant, you're the partner. Like you talk to prospects all the time, attack those things early on and do those audit assessments and just get that shit out of the way. So you can get to the real stuff and have a real conversation. And then you can assess the situation from there and get somebody to make change.
Yes. And it like fully works. Like, I like that you said that you like use it in your marriage as well. My husband definitely uses this for me most commonly with a phrase like, that can't possibly be what you're actually upset about. What is going on? And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right. It wasn't actually that you moved a spice around. It was like this thing I'm stressed out about or blah, blah, blah. And I love it as a way to talk about competitors as well. Like particularly if you know that the person you're pitching to is using a competitor. Like I sold a Gartner competitor for years to be like, so you're probably wondering about the similarities and differences with Gartner and like offering that up. I mean, it's a little bit of a shift on an accusation audit, but like calling out those things that you think they're wondering about, or like you could even go hard, Chris Voss, and be like, you're probably thinking that there's no way we could be as good as Gartner for less money. And you're throwing it. Yeah, you're throwing it right out there. What about Travis? For some reason, I felt like you were going to have a story that would be like, I use labeling and I got like an upgrade to a suite in Vegas, or like, you just have so much finesse to you. I thought you were going to wow us.
I mean, I was over here trying to be helpful, and I'm like, I might got a story like that. But the story that's coming to the front, and I was rapping with Matt about this, was just how I used labeling and the accusation audit in my life, and then how to like almost take the same exact thing and apply it to what you're doing. So it might not be. I'll have to think while I'm telling the story.
We can come back to you. So I have like 7 more questions, and we only have 7 minutes left. So you just run through that. I mean, we can run a little bit over, but I want to be respectful of people's time. And I want to make sure that we talk about the chapter, beware of the yes, master no.
Yep.
Because I think like Chris really maps out a trap I see a lot of sales professionals fall into. They have a sales style that really makes like them and their company and their product the hero of the story, instead of making the customer the hero of the story. Has this great quote that I'll share here with the slide. But like the gist of it is, if your prospect walks away from the conversation and they don't feel any responsibility for like the conclusions that you came to, like they don't feel like the two of you got there together, or particularly in customer success, like if they don't feel like that work is collaborative and that outcome is a shared outcome, then it's really not going to have the power and the impact. And he sort of related to this, I love this slide. There wasn't really a question there. I just think that's a powerful concept. But related to this, in the same chapter, Chris claims that we are so afraid of hearing no that we push too hard for yes, 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 and not yes in like a power of 3 sort of way where they're intentional yeses, like a blind yes, that we get counterfeit yeses. And why are we still so afraid of hearing no?
Cool. I'm gonna do my best to wrap this all up into one stream of thought. So here we
just like rant, just my like train of thought. Good luck.
No, we're gonna do it though. So I think because finishing out, one of the hardest things for me to figure out was how to use all this shit. Like you got all these, there's so many different use, like it's infinite. And so the thing that I used to like learn how to use this in life and then to perform accusation audits was the negotiation one sheet, which I actually dropped a link to in the comments. So it's a 2-page document. It starts with a goal. Can you share screens?
No, you have to upload it first.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
So
there's
so there's a section at the top with a goal where you identify the specific scenarios that represents the best case. You set optimistic but reasonable goal. You define it clearly. You write it down in the first section. You discuss this goal with the person or colleague that is, obviously going to have the meeting with you. And then you carry the written goal into negotiations. So like I would use this and then I would carry this 2-page document to every call that I had with a goal before everyone. So then I had a summary, like a couple of sentences about the known facts that led up to it. They're looking to not be last place in their region for reading scores this year. That's what it is. So now that I have that, it seems like, Mr. Superintendent, not being last place is valuable to you and your students and your schools and your leaders, right? Like you want to get more funding from the state to like actually help improve the reading comprehension of your students. Yeah, right. It seems like you don't really like the fact that you're last. It seems like you value improved reading comprehension for your students. And it also seems like using something like this platform that automatically helps them improve would make it easier for you to get that money from the state. Okay, great. So then now you go to the next question, which is calibrated questions to reveal the value and then overcome potential deal killers. And then you grab, 1 or 2 questions from your counterpart. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? How is this worthwhile? What's the core issue here that we're actually talking about, right? For your counterpart. Then to identify, like, what are the behind the table deal killers? Like, who's talking at the district level that's about to spend a whole lot of money that they didn't tell nobody about, that you're about to be cut out from? How does this affect the rest of your team? Are you going to not be able to hire staff if you buy this software? What are the challenges that your colleagues are going to have as a result of bringing me in if they're already using a different software? And then identifying and diffusing the deal issues and killers. Like, what are we up against here? Like, how am I supposed to get into the district with you to solve this? How does making a deal affect or improve the chances of you getting like tenure here? And then after you go through this, you follow up that they answered the calibrated question. So it seems like reading comprehension is important. It seems like you feel like my company might be a good fit to be the ones to help you work through that. And it seems like you're worried that you're not going to be able to afford it and like you're not going to understand where the money's coming from. I'm like, look, here's what I'll do. I will run a district-wide educational session where I take the reports from all your schools and I bring all your principals in, and I'll bring in education specialists from my company to teach all of you how to use the software for free. Worked every time. Every time.
I love that. And
so that was me wrapping it up as quickly as possible.
No. Because you layered like so many different things in there. And I pulled up this slide, and it's actually like probably the last question we're going to be able to get to, but it's on the calibrated questions and the how, like how are we going to do that? Why does that matter? What does that look like? What's like going deeper and deeper and deeper? Because, as this slide says, yes is nothing without the how. And like something that I think about a lot as I share, like all of us share a lot of content. People are like, you give so much stuff away from free. And I'm like, no, I give away the what and the why. And then folks hire me for the how. Like that's how important that how question is. Okay. I want to get to one last chapter, one last point here before we start wrapping it up. Chapter 8 is called Guarantee Executive. I don't know. Chris shares this, like he starts by sharing yet another harrowing story about a hostage situation. And let me just tell you, one of my main takeaways from this book was that if I think my sales job is stressful, I absolutely would not enjoy a job as a hostage negotiator. But it's on that like calibrated question. Yes is nothing without how, because like I work with a lot of teams who run complex, long, like high dollar sales cycles. I think all of us do or have it at some point. And one of the things that I always work with them on is being highly prescriptive, like that example that you shared, that story you just shared. And like, I think often in sales, I see folks work really hard to get the client to that first yes. And then we stop after that first yes. Like we don't use those calibrated questions that how do you expect me to do that? Or, you know, how would this look if everything went well, to dig deeper. And so I appreciate your story, Travis, but I'm going to put you on the spot, because one of my favorite ways to use the calibrated questions, and I'd love to hear if you've done this, is like in a negotiation, or, you know, folks in the comments too, if you have a good story, share it with us. When somebody's trying to get a better deal, get a discount, extend a timeline, and using that, like, well, how do you expect me to do that? How do you expect me to accomplish that question? It feels ballsy to me. Like I have done it, I have tried it, but of all of the Chris Voss techniques, I feel like that is the one that is like probably like I have to push hardest against my boundaries to use. So I'm wondering, like, am I alone on that? Are you guys using it? Tell me more, team.
It's a toughie, right? You're going in with a little. At the end of the day, all the prospects ever want, and what's always been true, is they want to be led, but not feel like they're being led, right? Like I want somebody to call me and tell me how to just get me through the process, get me all the way to the end. But I also don't want you to do it to where I don't feel like I have any control. You're just kind of pulling the donkey on the rope, right, on a walk to get us where we go. And so these questions, I've worked with some SDRs, I've worked with some reps who, like, shout out to them. They do this. They ask these questions when it comes to closing. I had one rep that was like the Chris Voss, like prodigy, like little mini me in the way that he would run deals and the ballsiness that he would have. But guess what? He would close more deals than the other reps more often than not, because he asked those hard calibrated questions of like, you know, how would you like me to proceed? Right? Okay. You want a discount. How would that look to you, you know, and putting that back on them, or how could we solve this problem? It goes back to your part of, you know, we become partners in this and they feel they're getting the opportunity to kind of dive in, or, you know, how am I supposed to do that? Leslie, you want a discount. How would that look in your world? What would you think we should do to get that to happen? Because again, you're involving them in the buying process, and that makes them feel really freaking good, right? Like, oh, that's a great question, Tom. But you risk the other side of them being like, Tom, are you seriously asking me that? Like, I don't know. That's your job. You tell me how we're supposed to do that. Right. And then you kind of flip your closed one into a closed loft very quickly. So it's all about that tone and that delivery. And he talks about in a few other chapters, you know, the 738-55, right? And like what you're doing and all of that. But I think within the delivery of those questions and having those calibrated questions, it can really work to let them feel like they're in charge. But let's be real, who's really driving the conversation?
Yeah, I love that. And I think my favorite thing that you said was like, you're bringing them along on the journey. So you're not asking these questions. You're not using any of these techniques to manipulate them into like being dragged along on the journey. Like you are creating a way of communicating that allows them to craft the journey with you and craft the outcome with you. I'm pulling up this comment from Matt because it's very funny. Okay, so I know we're a couple minutes over. Let's start bringing it home, team. I dropped the link to the Patreon in the chat. So if folks want to learn more, get full access to the private Slack. And then, like I said, in March, we'll be moving to Zoom. We'll be moving off LinkedIn Live and to Zoom. Check it out. Last question for you. Like what did I not mention? Like what is something that you really took away from this book that we didn't have a chance to touch on? And while you guys are thinking about that, I'd also give a call to action to the group, because like, you know, one of the reasons I started the book club in the first place was a frustration with just this like kind of mindset of consuming to consume and to brag about how many courses we've done, our books we've read, but not actually using it. So to everybody that's joined us today, drop a comment, and I want you to commit to one technique that is not something you regularly use that you are going to test this week with a spouse, with a child, with a prospect, whoever you're comfortable, testing it. But drop that comment to one technique, one thing you read in this book that you are going to absolutely commit to testing this week. So I want to see those comments. I want to see those folks committing to that call to action. I'll
commit to one.
Tell me.
I want to do the that's right. So I want to, in my convos and my demos this week, I've been trying to say that's right versus yes. So I really like the chapter on kind of your word choice. Because again, I brought up that data, right? The 738, 55, and learning how to really pick up on the cues. I really like body language. I kind of don't listen to words anymore. I kind of just, when I'm in discovery calls and looking, I kind of look more at body language. But I think like saying that's right to kind of let that person get little micro moments of confidence throughout your discussion with you. If they're, you're like, hey, so what do you feel is the best part of this platform for you and how you use it every day? And they say this, you go, that's right, versus like, yes, so I want to implement that. That's my big thing this week.
I love our audience. I love our community so much. How do you expect me to make that happen, Leslie? But that's okay, smart Alec. Expect you to just do it. You can test it on me.
The way you read that.
You can test it on me if you want to.
Max, I'll come too. I'll travel what you need.
Yeah, right. I love it. We're getting some great comments in here. Mirroring, accusation, audit.
Yeah, I'm gonna add with the week. I'm gonna add accusation audit in, except mine's gonna be a little different. I'm not so much, I'd say, selling a thing per se than a reaction to. So for those that don't know, your boy also makes music. I'm also a composer. So like people have been asking to like make, music for their content. And so like one of the things that I'm going to be looking for is like the that's lit, like response after they listen to like the project. So doing the accusation audits to like get the goals and then actually get the emotion of like, bro, like you actually hit the nail on the head with the sound.
I love that.
Sorry. And then before, one more thing. I just realized that a calibrated question is essentially the elephant in the room for anyone that never got the concept. Sure. So like, cause like I didn't realize that until like I started to go back and tell like, yo, a calibrated question is like saying and educating about the problem with the prospect without saying that you have a morale problem. Like, don't pull up to Tom and Leslie and be like, I know you have a morale problem at your company, and my software is the best to help you fix that. It's like,
no,
wait,
tell me about your culture right now, right? Like you're asking calibrated questions and leading questions to just get to where is going to go. Like, what's coming. Leslie said, when you're talking about competitors, they're going to bring up the common question, right? Like, get it out of the way. And when you could show them you're not afraid to do that, you actually earn more trust in your deals than the reps that are like steering away from those conversations and not going down that realm. And you can tell this rep doesn't want to dig into this with me. You're like, yo, so tell me about this. And they're like, yeah, that's coming. Don't worry about it. And you're like, but tell me about that. And they can't. Versus the rep that's like, Tom, before we even start here, this part of our platform isn't really up to caliber. I know it was a big part of what you were looking for. And I kind of want to dive into that with you. But I just want to put that out in there. Like, we're not going to be what you're looking for versus what you brought last week and telling me that you were looking at this company. We can't do that. What we can do is this, and this, which you have told me is your biggest priorities as of right now. So how important is that as a feature for you at this very moment, right? And they're like, shit, boom. And now it's already out and you're ready to have the real conversation.
And look at those layers too, right? Like, we might not have all of the features that you're looking for. Like, how important is this feature? Like, the layers, it's beautiful. We're already 9 minutes over. We're going to wrap. I feel like we could have stayed here all night.
Where are we going? What's up? Robbie needs a walk. I'll pull back up. I'll stay right here. You're in a rush.
To Shaw's Oyster House, and I'm going to meet a friend for a martini and oysters. So I'm the problem.
You're the problem.
Me and Tom will host. You can be out. Go get your oysters, Leslie.
We here for you.
Get your oysters.
Just switch
the camera off, Leslie. We cool.
This was incredible. I loved the energy. I loved and appreciated that y'all went down that kind of rabbit hole with me to talk about the intent behind the technique. I thought that was a really important piece of the discussion. I love those threads of like bringing the customer along with you. And that the correct use of these techniques, like when applied well by a salesperson who gets it, is to have a better, more meaningful conversation with your prospect, not to manipulate them. Just so powerful. Thank you to everybody who took time out of their schedule to join us. Tom, Travis, I'm deeply appreciative of your insights and you joining as well. Thank you, gents.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
My camera's about to die, so I'm like, let's go. Enjoy the Loasters.
All right, thanks, everybody. Good night.
See ya.
Peace. Oh God, this was lit. This was lit. Bye, Leslie.
We gotta back that. We gotta
wait.
It's live.
We do. It is the live.
She left.
She went hard, but we could still go if we wanted to. So this is where I'm like, Leslie, you left this in here, girl. You left this in. But it's fun. We're gonna leave the studio now. It is a problem.